Today we're discussing some off-season rumors, including potential free agent rumor involving damage to the Oilers and some trade talk around the Montreal Canadiens. I'm sure there are going to be more moves expected to happen there as they continue to go through their rebuild. Plus, we have some more signings involving some prospects, some big updates in Ottawa, including their ownership situation, plus also some big updates as well from the NHLPA, their new director. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade talk to take a look at here for the offseason. First up, before we get into the news, though, I do want to take a look back at this day in hockey history. A couple of substantial things have taken place on this day, March 30th, in the past, including all the way back in 1916 when the Montreal Canadiens actually won their very first Stanley Cup. So obviously that's a very historical day, not only in the NHL but Montreal Canadian history. And also on this day in 1979, the NHL ratified plans to absorb 4 WHA franchises. First, the WHA was about to be folding and going under, and they took on 4 teams from that league. Now, of course, I could go on and tell you where they are, but I'd like to know if you know who those teams are, 2 of which are still in existence, 2 of which are no longer what they once were, but of course they were relocated to other locations. Can you leave a comment down below and tell me who were the 4 teams that the NHL absorbed from the WHA in 1979? I look forward to reading through the comments to see how many of you get that question right. Of course, no cheating. Don't be using Google or anything. Go by your memory. If you don't know, then you don't know. It's just that simple. On to some signings here. The Boston Bruins have made another signing, including prospect Trevor Kuntars, a 22-year-old centerman, 6 feet tall, but almost 200 pounds. U.S.-born player from Buffalo. He was a 2020 third-round pick. Gets his entry-level contract in place. He played for 3 years at Boston College and now makes the jump to the NHL's Boston Bruins. So another prospect signing under college there. Another one as well in Colorado. They've signed Sam Malinsky, who's a right shot undrafted defenseman, 5'11", 190. He's 25 years old, or will be in July, so just about 25. So certainly been in college for a fair bit of time here. Obviously, because of his age, he's not actually eligible for an entry-level contract. Once you turn 25, you would get the standard player contract, so he gets a 2-year, 2-way deal. Obviously, league minimum at the NHL, I believe, was $150 at the American Hockey League. Malinsky played his college hockey at Cornell University. So another interesting signing there. And of course, on to some other news. We around the league is some news in Ottawa. We actually have a lot of news in Ottawa today, including the fact that we get confirmation that one of the top defensemen, Thomas Chabot, is going to be out for about 2 weeks. We knew yesterday that it was unlikely he was going to play today, but we're waiting on further details of the situation. Definitely appears to be like a wrist injury. So Chabot's out, which means that newly signed prospect and one of the guys they've been waiting for because he was playing college hockey for a few years, Tyler Clevin, will make his NHL debut tonight as the Ottawa Senators are at home to do battle with the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, within that game tonight, there is going to be lots of rich people and different celebrities in attendance because there's lots in town that are interested in some of the groups that are want to buy the Senators from the Melnyk family. I'm not sure if Gary Bettman is still in town or not, but of course he was out there last game, did some media availability. But Ryan Reynolds, of course, the Hollywood celebrity who's been in the mix here, working with the Remington Group, and Christopher Brady, they are there. They've met with the mayor earlier, I believe. Some of them also met with the NCC regarding the LeBron Flats potential arena project. So they're going to be around tonight. There's also confirmation from different reporting sources that Nico Sparks or members of his group are also around at tonight's game as well. So there are all these different groups that are in the bidding process are essentially going to be coming to town to visit. They're meeting with the leadership of the team. So obviously Pierre Dorian, the GM, as well as the ones on the business side that lead everything, including Anthony LeBlanc, and the ones who look after the books. And of course, what I mean with the mayor and then the NCC and everything like that, do the arena, kind of get a full lay of the land. And everything like that. That's believed that Michael Andlauer and his group should be around. I'm not sure if he's going to be around tonight. I believe that's more so trending towards them coming to the game on the weekend with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So now, of course, the Andlauer group is not the only ones. Besides these guys, there's another billionaire that we can add to the mix. So Rocco Tullio is yet another group. He, of course, is owns the Oshawa Generals and, of course, Rock Developments, which is his main business. They've added Steve Apostolopoulos, who's a Canadian billionaire he's a partner in a large real estate firm, founder of Six Ventures Private Equity, a fund which manages more than $5 billion. He's a Harvard graduate and a billionaire. So obviously another deep pocket person added to that group. So it seems like every time you turn around, there's getting news here that these different groups are loading up on different people backing them or joining the groups. And it's quite crazy just how much of a hot commodity this team has become. I know there was talk on Insider Trading on TSN that some of the other groups are still very much willing to bring Ryan Reynolds in to their groups should his group, Remington Group, not be the successful one to land the franchise here. But we'll see. Obviously, him showing up with the group just kind of shows how committed he is to staying with that and seeing it through. So it should be an interesting night in Ottawa as they obviously, have a lot of these people in town to kind of check everything out, and things are progressing here. Well, as we mentioned before, should be more news probably sometime in the next, I would say, 3 to 4 weeks as far as who the new owners are going to be, and they're hoping to have the sale wrapped up and closed by mid to late June. So we'll see more as this story continues to evolve. Now, we also got news today from the NHLPA. The new director, Marty Walsh, held his first news conference speaking to the media today, going over some of the the hot topic issues and things that are top of mind and top priority for he and the PA now that he's taking over and running that leadership. Now, obviously, one of the big things was asked him about the salary cap, because we heard Gary Bettman make comments before that the league is willing to consider bumping up the NHL salary cap by more than $1 million, because that's all it's scheduled right now due to the fact that the players' debt to the owners from the pandemic is still not completely repaid. That escrow amount is still not quite where it needs to be. It could be by the end of the year, but it's not a guarantee. It looks like it's probably going to go into the early part of next year before that is completely resolved and settled, which means that really all we're guaranteed to see is $1 million increase. But there's lots of teams that would really love to see a bigger jump because they're just so strapped and tied into the heart of the cap here that they can't do a lot of maneuvering. It's preventing trades from happening. It's preventing more free agents from cashing in, etc. And Walsh made it known that they are certainly willing to entertain the concept and idea of raising the cap more than $1 million, but they have no intention on budging on escrow. Escrow is capped at 6%, and they will not budge on that. And I'm sure that based on the comments from Gary Bettman before, that's likely what the league would expect of them if they were going to make a concession that way, that it would be cap going up in exchange for a higher percentage on escrow, and they don't have any interest on that. So we'll say that doesn't give us much hope that there really would be much of a negotiation at all between the two sides, and really doesn't give a lot of hope that the cap is going to go up by more than $1 million, which is unfortunate. But I do understand from the players' perspective why they wouldn't want to raise escrow. They were fighting for a really long time to get that lowered to the point that it is now. They don't want to automatically, give in and make a concession here to raise it again just like that. That would not be a good tactic on their part. They also discussed the possibility as well about a best-on-best tournament. That seems to be something that's quite important to a large part of the player membership as well. So one of the things that, obviously he's well used to being, within politics, and he worked U.S. federal politics for quite some time. So he's, obviously used to that nature, but at the same time, it sounds like there's a lot of push to want to move forward with the tournament, even if the Russian team can't participate. Obviously right now, Russians are not permitted from participating in international competitions because of everything going on in Ukraine. And as much as the NHL has kind of pushed us back a year to 2025, hoping things will get resolved and to be able to move forward with them being involved, there's obviously a lot of pressure from everybody else to move forward with this tournament to get a best-on-best thing arranged. And at this point, they need to make, so the priority for them is to move forward with or without Russia. So that's going to be an interesting topic for them to follow as well. And it also made mention, and it's certainly something that they want to get more discussion, more ideas, and more engagement from the players on different issues. For example, one of the things that they're polling the players association members right now, as well as on the playoff format, for example. There's been some pretty high-profile players out there that have voiced their displeasure with the current format. So obviously hearing that from some of those prominent members has caused them to kind of do a pulse check with the membership, and we'll see. It doesn't mean that they're going to come up with anything to propose differently. It doesn't mean that they're going to get a significant enough vote to even go to the league and ask for change, because we don't know how it's all going to go. But we do know there are some players who would like to see the format change, and there's certainly a lot of arguments for doing so. So we'll see where that goes. But interesting to hear what the hot topics were and the things written at the top of Marty Walsh's priority list as he gets fully entrenched here in his role as executive director of the NHLPA. Now, on to some of the rumors in this section here we want to talk about today. What I want to talk about a free agent rumor involving the Edmonton Oilers. Now, the Oilers are in a pretty good spot right now to make the playoffs. I think that they're well positioned, that it wouldn't be shocking to see them maybe even make a decent playoff run. It wouldn't be shocking to see them maybe even win the Western Conference. You just never know. They have quite a special group there. I mean, yes, they don't have any elite goaltending, but otherwise they've been on a strong, good stretch of play here. They got 3 players that are likely going to have 100 points or more. They've got a much better blue line with the addition of Matthias Ekholm, and I think that they're a real, contending team coming out of that conference for sure. But looking ahead, like every other team, they do have things to address in the offseason. And one of the things mentioned by Frank Saravalli on his Daily Faceoff show was talking about how they might be able to use, I guess you kind of call it a loophole, but not really, in the CBA to maybe bring in a player or two via free agency, because there are obviously going to be some holes in their lineup. Maybe a guy like Connor Brown might be a player that they target. And the loophole could be that players like Brown, who have been out for the entire season on a long-term injury reserve, are also, just like players that are above the age of 35, eligible for like a bonus-laden contract. So, you don't see regular standard player contracts with a bunch of built-in bonuses but have a smaller salary. That's not how those work. But in those scenarios, 35-plus contract, or if they've been out for a significant portion of time on LTIR, you can do that. So if Connor Brown, for example, said, yeah, I'd take a short-term contract for a year to kind of reprove myself, $1 million or less, and you can put a bunch of bonuses in there. So as long as I can come back, I can play so many games, I can play or score so many goals or whatever, you can get a bunch of extra money. They might be able to make the contract worth, say, $4 or $5 million, but his salary might, for cap purposes, might only count as, say, 1, for example. So that might be a way for them to add a player if they're willing to look at guys like that. And there was a long-rumored interest of Connor Brown, just as an example, to the Oilers. So we'll see. Obviously, they're going to be tight up against the cap. They're going to have some, obviously, different things to work on. I wouldn't be surprised if they're trying to move Jack Campbell, but it's not going to be easy. And if the cap only goes up by $1 million, like we were saying, again, that's going to be a prime team that's going to be tight up against it and tough to make a lot of moves. Now, as I mentioned as well, we'll take a look at some trade talk as well. Came across an article looking at the future of Brendan Gallagher in Montreal, and you have to think as well, given what some of the teams out there are doing when it comes to salary cap floor, like the Arizona Coyotes, you have to think there's also a possibility that the Carey Price contract could be something that we see moved in the offseason. They already unloaded the Shea Weber contract, which has ultimately been moved a couple of times now. But when it comes to Brendan Gallagher, if you take a look at his contract, obviously it's not favorable given how much time he's missed the past couple of years, how low his production has been in conjunction to what he's earning, and obviously that doesn't bode well for, obviously the team valuing your contract. Now, I think the team really loves what he brings. There's a lot of intangibles, good leader on and off the ice. They do need to have some veterans through this rebuild, and maybe he's one of those guys that does end up staying, but at the end of the day, when you look at the contract, the fact they're going to be in a tight cap situation, it's not the most favorable, and it's also not really even likely that we see a Brendan Gallagher buyout. If you take a look at the buyout contract, they would be tied to him until like 2030 if they did a buyout this year. They wouldn't get some significant savings for the first few years, but then they would have a lot of dead money for a number of years as well. So it's probably not likely that we see a scenario like that unfold. Now, a trade is possible, and just like I mentioned with the Carey Price contract being someone that they consider moving, and there's a lot of teams out there, and not, that are, well, there's not a lot, but there's a handful that are going to have a decent amount of cap space, and some of them that are trying to purposely not spend a lot of money in actual player salaries, and obviously want to have a few veterans around to kind of bring them up to the salary cap floor, i.e. Arizona. Now, Gallagher has a modified no trade. I believe it's 6 teams that he can block So that's not a big chunk of the NHL teams, of course. So no guarantee that he gets moved, but it's certainly a contract I think that some people are wondering what the future holds for him, just given where everything's at. So I came across a Montreal-based article that's kind of exploring the idea, looking at how a buyout is unlikely because of the long-term contract and everything that's left on it. But at the same time, you have to think that if they could move the contract, they would. But it would have to be to a team that has a lot of cap flexibility. There's just not a lot out there. But if they could move the contract to Carey Price and get themselves out of long-term injury reserve, that might be really good for a long-term health of their cap situation as well. Obviously, we've seen teams like the Coyotes, for example, want to have a lot of these dead contracts to bring them up to the salary cap floor so they can have their actual roster players making a lot less money. They can sign players for cheap, and they don't need to have those bigger salaries to get to the cap floor, which is kind of like a loophole, which I don't personally like. I think it's a way for them cheaping out because all these LTIR contracts are going to be covered largely by insurance. So if they're not actually paying a lot of that money out, it really allows them to, it should almost be considered cap circumvention in my opinion, but technically it really isn't. But obviously, like I said, there's a few teams out there with lots of space that could use the Price contract. It would help Montreal to move on from it. At this point, I think we can all fairly safely say that Carey Price is not coming back. He's been gone for too long, missed the better part of 2 years. You don't see players really come back from that. There's rumor that he's moving west for family reasons after the season. So, you know, it's quite likely that the contract technically could be dealt. I mean, that would not be shocking or surprising at all. And I would not be doubt at all if maybe the Coyotes, like they have the Weber contract now, if they ended up picking up that one too. Doesn't mean there's no rumor suggesting that the Coyotes are going to be looking to do that. It's just something that, based on Montreal's cap situation, it wouldn't be surprising at all if they try to move that contract, knowing that he's not coming back. But we'll see what happens. I do expect some additional changes in Montreal this offseason, but some of these veteran deals, like the dead contract to Carey Price, since he's not going to play anymore, and of course Brendan Gallagher, are certainly going to be reviewed, and we'll see what happens. I would not be surprised if Gallagher ends up staying, especially if they move the Price contract. So let me know your thoughts on everything else discussed here today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.